All right. The gentleman to my far left, what's your name, sir?
Frank Esposito.
You have a copy
There's
of the
Andy.
complaint?
He don't look too happy. The big
Right, now
cop,
to make a statement
Genovese
as to the
Capo,
charge,
brought to
any
his
statement you make
knees,
used against
Mr. Golden
the right to a
Tan.
lawyer. Can you afford your own lawyer?
He definitely brought to his knees.
The substance of the charges, sir, is that you committed crimes in the second degree involving the promotion, facilitation of the crimes of racketeering, business of criminal usury, promotion of gambling.
Judge just gave Andy the word on how serious all the crimes he's charged with are.
Has never absconded on any bail that was said. I submit $1 million bail is ludicrous under these circumstances.
The most powerful capo in Jersey, till yesterday.
Required by the parole board to serve up to 11 years. For those reasons, I am satisfied that there would be a danger of the defendant fleeing and that a substantial bail should be set.
Born in Livingston, New Jersey back on August 9, 1930, Andy Gerardo was reared and educated on the gritty streets of Newark. In that era, Newark was a largely immigrant Italian neighborhood teeming with new arrivals from southern Italy and Sicily. Andy was a scrappy Italian kid prone to the fast and loose life of the streets, and he fell in early with the older Italian racketeers who operated in that area. Soon, he became an associate on record with a mafia faction operating under the guidance of Genovese Family Capo regime, Ruggiero Richie the Boot Boiardo. For many years, a young Andy Gerardo maintained a low profile, and not much ever came out about him or his racket activities. Only with his later ascension as Boiardo's right arm did Gerardo's true significance within the New Jersey underworld hierarchy start to emerge. From the late 1960s forward, his face was seen regularly around the Boiardo regime's watering holes and social clubs. Andy's name was gaining prominence. It is believed that by the mid-1970s, the fledgling hoodlum received his button under Richie the Boot's sponsorship. As a side note, knowing the bloody reputation and psychological makeup of Boiardo, for Andy to have achieved his button, there is no doubt that Gerardo worked for it. Boiardo was not one for handing out memberships to guys who weren't willing or able to perform work as needed for the regime. With his new status as a made guy, Gerardo was now a full-fledged mafioso. Andy Gerard had finally arrived. It was suspected by local and federal law enforcement mob watchers that Andy had committed a few pieces of work on Boiardo's orders, thereby qualifying him for formal induction into Cosa Nostra's ranks. He was now on equal footing with such mafioso as the Boot's son, Anthony Tony Boy Boiardo, as well as members of other brigadas such as Robert Bobby Basile Occhipinti of the DeCavalcante family, the Gambinos Anthony Little Tony Carminati, and Salvatore Tutti Lombardino of the Colombo family. Equally important, he was now trusted by and operated in unison with, if still subordinate to, such top iconic Garden State bosses as Gerardo Jerry Cattina, his brother Eugene Gene Cattina, Louis Bobby Manna, Angelo the Gyp DiCarlo, Louis Streaky Gatto, and Vincent Chin Gigante. Because of his close relationship with his capo, Gerardo became more and more trusted to handle the troops and oversee the regime's day-to-day racket activities. It was no small accomplishment in a regime said to have included close to 40 very ambitious inducted mafia soldiers and dozens more associates. Gerardo was to rise above them all. He stood out like a shining star among them all in Richie Boiardo's eyes, so much so that when the old capo died of natural causes in 1984, Gerardo rose to take the Boot's spot. It was Boiardo's wish, and he had personally pre-selected Andy Gerard to succeed him. With his selection to serve as the official Capo di Decina of the Northern New Jersey faction, Andrew Gerardo became one of the most powerful racketeers in the state. It was a position that he wore well. He was generally considered to be a sharp guy, an intelligent hood who had good instincts on the streets. Primarily engaged in the bookmaking racket, he operated horse and sports betting rings throughout several towns and neighborhoods in both North and South Jersey. He also ran an extensive lottery operation that stretched throughout the northern sector of the state. These bread-and-butter rackets were supported by the crew's ancillary organized rackets of loan sharking, various shakedowns and extortions, labor union pillaging and racketeering, business infiltration, arson, fraud, and a host of other mob activities. Once in the Capo's seat, his minions maintained the tried-and-true rackets that their original boss, Richie Boiardo, had developed many years earlier. Under Gerardo's stewardship, they even expanded into South Florida. While he was consolidating his position and power within the family, Andy made sure to either purchase, partner, or infiltrate several legitimate businesses along the way. This gave the fledgling Capo an air of respectability, as well as several solid sources of legit income for both his pocket and the Internal Revenue Service agents who periodically snooped around looking for scraps by which to try and form a tax evasion case against him. After a major gambling investigation during which state troopers raided multiple locations and executed arrest warrants in 5 residences, authorities discovered boxes of gambling slips that they seized. They also seized several automobiles used to conduct the racket. In 1969, he and 18 others were convicted in state court of operating a multi-million-dollar-a-year numbers lottery ring from August 1966 through February 1967. A few years later, in 1972, the IRS stepped in to analyze those betting slips and monthly gambling records and later determined a tax deficiency of almost $900,000 for the years 1966 and 1967. Plus, they added fraud penalties of almost $500,000 for a total of about $1.5 million. Gerardo got buried under the 2 cases, and both criminal and civil penalties were lodged against him by the IRS. With these convictions and the greater scrutiny that came along with it, Gerardo was rudely awakened to the fact that he was no longer a low-key and shadowy second-string hood in the eyes of the law. He was now on Front Street. He knew that and tried to make the required efforts to indemnify himself from future prosecutions the best he could. Over the next decade or so, Gerardo acquired investments and either owned stock in or actually operated a garment firm named Antone Fashions, an electrical contracting company called Electricians, and the T&T Contracting and Trucking Company. These last 2 businesses were awarded several lucrative public works contracts through the years. He also started spending more and more time in South Florida, where he later decided to purchase a second home in the city of Aventura, located between Miami and Fort Lauderdale. Eventually, he would migrate down there for good, but for the present time, Andy utilized it as a sort of retreat from the daily rigors and pressures of mafia membership. But a mafioso is always a mafioso, and within short order, Gerardo quickly expanded his operations and reach into the Sunshine State as well. Among the troops of the Boiardo-Gerardo crew were some of the most notorious names of New Jersey's underworld, including Thomas Pee Wee DePhillips, Anthony DeVingo, Ralph Spud Vaccaro, Joseph Josie Zarro, and Silvio DeVito, to name but a few. During his tenure at the top of New Jersey's mob heap, Gerardo was as capable as any. He ruled with a strong hand and was considered a no-nonsense guy. He was thought to have utilized Ralph Spud Vaccaro as his acting capo or second-in-command. Vaccaro was exceptionally helpful as the boss's eyes and ears in the later years when Gerardo chose to spend more and more of his time down in Florida. In January 1984, a retired cop from East Orange, New Jersey named Mike Russell was driving down Bloomfield Avenue one day in North Newark when he came upon a fender bender that had gotten physical. 2 young guys from one vehicle were attacking an older guy from the other vehicle. So Russell swung his truck to the curb and quickly jumped out to even up the odds as the 2-on-1 fisticuffs ensued. Russell hit one guy, knocking him to the pavement, while the other guy hit the other one. Together, they leveled the playing field enough that the attackers jumped in their car and drove off. After thanking Russell for coming to his defense and introducing himself, Andy Gerardo invited his newfound friend into the local coffee shop across the street for breakfast and a cup of joe as a small token of his appreciation. This incident was to become the pivotal event, starting a very unlikely and close friendship between the mafioso and the former policeman. Gerardo took such a liking to Mike that he soon invited him to rent the empty storefront next door to Gerardo's headquarters a private mob social club nicknamed the Cage, from which he ruled over Genovese operations in the Garden State. Russell told Gerardo that he owned a small oil truck delivery business, and in no time at all, he started running his company from that little office next to the Cage. And his friendship with Andy Gerard and with many of his mob underlings started to blossom. And the funny thing is that Gerardo knew Mike was an ex-cop because Mike told him so at breakfast the first day they met. But Andy dismissed that fact because Russell seemed so sincere. Of course, he was anything but. Immediately after breakfast, Russell got on the horn with an old friend of his named Nick Oriolo from the New Jersey State Police to ask about this guy with the name Andrew Gerardo. Gerardo seemed to be a very important guy because during that cup of coffee, numerous other Italian-looking men, serious-looking guys, would stop by their booths, say hello, and converse. Once told that Andy was the kingpin of the Jersey branch of the Vito Genovese Mafia family, Russell thought he had hit the lottery and envisioned sugar plums and law enforcement stardom potential. The state police soon outfitted Russell with all the makings for his make-believe oil company office, Premium Petroleum, and later they outfitted the building with all sorts of electronic surveillance, including hidden cameras and bugs, and started tapping all the phone lines. They also later provided Mike with another undercover cop as a partner in his fake oil company, and as an added bonus, Mike had already started filming everything on his own, long before he got additional help from the New Jersey State Police. With only a single wall now separating the state police from New Jersey's mob, they commissioned Mike Russell to work undercover, gathering evidence against Gerardo and his associates. Mike Russell was also back on New Jersey's payroll in his new undercover position, earning a weekly government paycheck. Some of the secrets he discovered were that the crew ran an active illegal casino several nights a week next door. They also controlled one of the largest sport betting networks in the whole state. Russell had gained the trust of Gerardo to the point that he was soon involved in their garbage hauling rackets, toxic waste dumping, and bookmaking. Equally important was the fact that the wise guys started talking less guardedly when Russell was present. It was to become a big problem for the Jersey crew. 14 months later in 1986, prosecutors and state law enforcement authorities announced sweeping indictments against 41 alleged crime figures as a result of this massive undercover probe that had been named Operation Intrepid. Included in the arrest were Gerardo, De Phillips, Vaccaro, Zarro, and many of the crew's other top figures. The end result was either guilty pleas or convictions after the trial of nearly all defendants. It was a major blunder on the part of Andy Gerard and a rare misjudgment of character for the otherwise street-savvy Capo. Unfortunately, his lapse of good judgment dealt a severe blow to the Newark-based crew. As a side note, you can watch part of an HBO documentary about Mike Russell's infiltration into the Jersey mob at the end of this video. In a back-to-back 102-page indictment the following year in 1987, which was directly tied to some of the same evidence gathered during Operation Intrepid, Andy was among 16 of his crew indicted a second time. This time the charges came from the Trenton prosecutor's office and alleged the Gerardo regime raked in a whopping $20 million a year through arson, gambling, loan sharking, and racketeering under the direction of Gerardo, who by this time was already in state prison serving his previous sentence for bookmaking. The indictment also spelled out charges of embezzling over $3 million from a mob-operated, union-sponsored health care plan that involved a corrupt dentist and land developer. These mafia operations were so well-entrenched and pervasive throughout northern New Jersey that the New Jersey State Attorney General filed a forfeiture and return order of $31 million in illegal racket profits in either cash or assets. They were accused of running several separate but interconnected gambling and loan shark rings in Newark and sections of New York City. Soldier Anthony DeVingo allegedly controlled Local 262 of the Wholesale and Retail Department Store Workers Union of West Orange for the crew, which was later drained of the $3 million from the union slush fund. In short order, Gerardo and the others ended up getting buried. They all went to prison, with Andy serving several bids consecutively. Upon their release, the crew had lost a lot of their tight grip over what had once been an ironclad hold over much of northern New Jersey's underworld and its related legitimate industries. After his release from prison, Andy chose to more or less semi-retire from the day-to-day activities of New Jersey's Cosa Nostra. He stayed more and more down south and only came north for personal family functions or when absolutely necessary. He had had enough, and it was time to kick back a bit and enjoy his senior years. Andy Gerard Gerardo passed away on January 29, 2012 at the comfortable age of 81 years old. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Mob Fireside Chat. Thank you for watching. Until next time.
And my work boots, which are only dirty from walking the streets of Newark, not from doing any work at all. This is what I wear on a daily basis, and no one ever questioned it as to why I have no oil trucks, no employees, the uniforms don't match the name on the window. No one ever questioned anything. Yeah. No, it's okay. Hey, Joe. Sal.
Hello, Mike.
How you doing? How you doing? All right.
How you?
Good. How's everything, huh?
Good, Mike.
Live from Channel 5 News in New York, this is the 10 o'clock news.
A 14-month undercover investigation climaxed with the arrest of dozens of alleged mobsters this morning in New Jersey. Frank Grimes and a Channel 5 camera crew were up early to join 200 state police as they raided the suspects' homes.
Early this morning, North Jersey, Operation Intrepid is underway. Tommy Pee Wee DePhillips arrested at his home. One of 41 alleged leaders and associates of the Genovese organized crime family operating in northern New Jersey that were rounded up today by New Jersey State Police. Andy Gerardo, head of the New Jersey Genovese faction. Ralph Vaccaro, second in command to Gerardo. Gerardo and the others are charged with running $1 million a week racketeering operation centered in, but not limited to, the Newark area. The key to the case was this oil company in North Newark. The sign says Premium Petroleum, but cops say the company didn't sell much oil. It didn't even have an oil truck. It was a phony company set up by the state police, set up right next door to Andy Gerardo's headquarters. Only a thin wall separated the undercover cops in Premium Petroleum from the alleged hoods in Gerardo's headquarters. Using bugs and a video camera, cops were able to see and record the group's daily activities, which included at times running a casino there. A grand jury has been hearing evidence against the Gerardo faction, and indictments are expected. Frank Grimes, Channel 5 News.
This is where it started, right here in this intersection in January 1984. I was coming south on North 8th Street towards the intersection of Bloomfield Avenue here. Upon arriving here, I observed a disturbance in an auto, what looked to be an auto accident. One white guy, two black guys. I zipped the truck right over here, slammed it in park, and jumped out to go to the help of the guy in trouble, the white guy, 2 against 1. I evened up the odds. I smacked one of the guys, knocked him on his ass, and one was invited into the luncheonette for breakfast by the white guy. I parked the truck and I went right into the luncheonette. As I come in there, this guy, Andy, he introduced himself as Andy Gerard. I said, I'm Mike Russell. He says, you sit in my booth. He sits down, he says, why'd you help me out? I says, I do it for anybody. I'm an ex-cop. Perks up, he says, where, when? He goes, what's happening with this ex-cop stuff? I tell him, East Orange, and I left the police force because I wanted to try self-employment. I got young kids. As I'm sitting in the booth eating breakfast with him, in comes Tommy DePhillips, also known as Pee Wee, notorious gangster from the North Ward for many years, a very prominent bookmaker. Pee Wee says, that's great, you helped out our boss, this and that. Now I'm beginning to realize what's going on with this guy, Andy. As I leave the luncheonette, I call up Nick, a friend of mine. Nick Oriello, a sergeant with the New Jersey State Police. Called him right up and I said, Nick, tell me who this guy Andy Gerard is. He says he's a Genovese boss. I said, oh yeah? Well, I just made his acquaintance, and the guy just bought me breakfast. And now I can come and go from the luncheonette where he has his breakfast. Nick says, Mike, please stay on it, you know. Stay with it and see what you can hear for me.
Right, bye.
I become a fixture at this luncheonette. I'm there 5 days a week. I begin to identify the gangsters through plate numbers and who's meeting Andy at what time every day. Nick begins to pay me for this after a while. As the summer rolls around, Jersey's hit with a garbage strike. In the middle of the summer, Andy says to me, hey, you drive a truck, right, Mike? I said, yeah. He says, do me a favor. I want you to go on a garbage route and break the strike. I'll give you a helper.
That went good, and the state cops are getting excited because now it's really getting serious. Next, I go over to Jersey carting and dispose of toxic waste. I put a 55-gallon drum of unknown toxic stuff in my truck, filled with restaurant garbage, and went to the dumps and dumped it. Of course, I'm reporting all this back to Nick. Now I'm getting in good with the bad guys, but it took months of doing this dirty shit for them before one of the hoods gave me my big break in the case. James Palmieri, also known as JP, underboss for Joe Zara, made guy. He says, Mike, we're gonna rent the store in front of the club. You know, anybody who wants it, you know, if you want it for, you know. I said, Jesus, Jay, you know, that'd be real good for my oil company, and it'd be great for it. Right on the corner there, I'll let her up the window. I said, but I'm 99% sure I want it, but give me about a couple hours just to make sure. He says, all right. He says, write your name, address, and your phone number down, your date of birth, and all this stuff. I knew what that was for because they got cops in their pocket, and they were gonna have me checked out. But that goes with the game. And I called Nick up, and I said, Nick, we can rent the store right in front of the clubhouse. He said, what are we going to put in there? I said, we put the oil company in there. He said, okay. He said, let me get on the phone. And Nick called the master sergeant. He called the lieutenant. He called the captain. And then they got to a lieutenant colonel and said, rent the store. The New Jersey State Police began picking up the tab for the entire premium petroleum operation. Every day that went by, I spent less and less time as an oil man. Within a month, I was full-time undercover for the police. My store is on the ground floor and the mob headquarters are in the back. The store is separated from their place by a thin partition with a door in it. But we keep the door locked between the two of us. I walk around the building and go in the outside door. Hey, Benny. What are you doing, Ben? Are you? And they were very friendly to me. They wanted to know what kind of business I was in, what I was doing, but due to the fact Joe Zara had me checked out, and I was all right with Joe, he owns the building, he's a made guy, I'm in, and it's business as usual. And now I'm walking right among them, and the more I'm in here, the more they get to see me. About a month in here, then they're conducting business in front of me, so I'm no stranger to them. They're not hiding their gambling records, they're not stopping talking about them, and I'm walking right among them when they're conducting business, eyeballing the whole thing. At which time I'm calling every move into Nick, and the state police are documenting everything that I call in. I get to know the whole neighborhood. I uncover all the joints where they run their rackets. This is North Newark. This is the last Italian stronghold. This is their little Italy section of actually North Jersey. Even though they don't live here, 90% of them live out in residential areas. Make a right here. This is where they come to conduct their business. In this North Newark area, there are 2 mob headquarters, 4 social clubs or casinos, and numerous businesses owned by associates that generate millions of dollars for these gangsters every week. We're coming up to this bar right here on the next corner. This is Pee-wee's bar, pizzeria. It's a whole operation now. As we go by, you're going to be able to see one of those cargo trailers in the back parking lot here, which is attached to the building, and it just looks like a back wall of the parking lot. That is also one of their gambling rooms. There's a guy. We got this guy. Film him. That's Michael Cordella. He's a union official, but he made you, so get the fuck out of here. He's looking directly at you. Make it right here. Make it right. All right, now you see where that truck is down here? This is a hot spot now. You don't really want to stop in front of this place. There's Andy's car right here. This is a rent-a-car he's using right now, this gray thing here. That's Andy's car. 226 ZZU, that's his ride. That's his place, electricians. Slow down right here. This is Phil Denoya's store where he keeps the gambling records. Right here where these iron gates are up. And this club next door to it is a Genovese club, this North Ward Italian Social Club, right there on the corner. Very significant club. Now right here is Jamo's club. James Calabrese's, right here with these two air conditioners. And that too is another significant Genovese operation for this area. All right, make it right here. I want to show you one of Pee Wee's clubs. It's a block up on the right-hand side here, okay? And there's a guy right in front of it. So let's, I gotta get closer and see who this fucking guy is. Yeah, see where the stucco place is where them guys are in front? That's one of their clubs. That's on the corner of North 6th and 3rd Avenue. This is Pee Wee's club right here. I gotta look the other way. Look over here.
Okay, go.
All right.
He's pulling in the park.
All right.
I'm gonna stop next to him.
All right.
All
right, get him. Slow down. Get him right here. That's Andy.
Hey, the big boss. All right, now we're cooking.
Great, go ahead. Okay, pull up a little bit.
Pull up.
Keep going, nice and easy. Keep going, follow him now.
I don't see him. I'm looking
All
out
right.
the window.
He's right in that trailer there.
We make a right or what?
On 3rd, right here by the sausage place. Is that his place?
Yeah.
Yeah, make it right here. Now you'll take him right down to his business. Is he following us, Bob?
Yep.
Okay. Slow down at the stop sign, Frank. Give Bobby a chance to get a shot at him.
Shut the fuck up.
Come on, Frank.
I know.
I fucking love this shit. Especially when we get the big guys.
You better disappear. He could possibly see something through this window, I don't know.
He turn in, Bob?
Yeah. Turned in.
All right.
He's going.
Yeah.
Great. Tight close-up.
That was a neat man. Dynamite.
1980 in March, I was working organized crime out of the TAC force. And at the time, I was trying to penetrate the Lucchese crime family, who was very active in this area right here in Newark. I start down the alleyway. That's when Joey Riccardi hit me with a devastating sucker punch, floored me. And then I started getting hit from all over. The only thing I could do was cover up. My head was driven against the brick wall with the gunshot wound from the impact of it. I received 60 stitches in the back of the head, and from that, my whole face was blackened, my nose was busted, I lost this front tooth, that was gone. I lost the two senses, taste and smell, and that was my biggest incentive every time I eat a meal and I can't taste anymore, or I think about what happened to me down an alleyway. That was my biggest incentive to come back and take these people on.
When you're up against the mob, you gotta know the players, their haunts, and their organization. Andy Gerard is the top guy in North Newark. He's the capo or captain and runs the family. He's in charge of the made guys. They're the managers. They run a crew of associates or workers on the streets. But everything the group is into, the made guys control. This kind of organization is what makes the mob so powerful. Organized crime preys on people's weaknesses. Gambling, narcotics, and they hook them in. When you can't pay up and you lose the money to them, right away they want to shift you to their loan shark, which is one of their guys. From then on, you have to make enormous payments and you never get out from under this loan shark. He's on your back, threatening you with physical violence, harm to your family, then they can proceed on and try and infiltrate your business. They run a casino or a large-scale card game from inside your business. From there, they literally own you. That's the way these guys work every day of the week.
I got seniority there now. I was talking to him about that today. I'm like a full-fledged member. It doesn't bother them, or it doesn't occur to them that I'm not doing anything there. That's how well I fit in with them. They talk to me, they borrow my chair, they borrow my suntan oil. It's all fun and games.
They just conduct business right around me like I'm one of them. Yeah.
No, it's all right.
Hey, Joe. Sal.
Hello, Mike.
How you doing? How you doing? All right.
How you
Good. How's everything, huh?
Good, Mike.
Now we've gone down the road from July until the beginning of October. We're well into the investigation. We realize we're onto something bigger than we ever dreamed of. So the state police decide to give me a helper, an undercover cop, Billy Newsom. I tell the bad guys he's going to be working with me, no problems. For the next 2.5 months, all the time making believe we're running an oil company, we're actually taking plate numbers, identifying and keeping track who comes in and out of the place, and overhearing conversations which establishes that there is a major organized crime empire in the back there. Gambling, loan sharking, labor racketeering, everything thereabout, this was it. We worked every day at it. By December, we got enough evidence to get a judge to sign a wiretap order. All the lawyers compiled the papers, and we got the okay to install the bugs. After we went up on the bugs, Billy and I spent most of our time in a store. I would stay by the spy hole and gather evidence and identify the people who were speaking into what bugs at which time. Billy, in turn, would stay by the phone and call the plan up and make the logs out.
We got a ton of stuff. We begin to lock them in on gambling, labor racketeering, loan sharking charges as we continue with the electronic surveillance. We also monitor the conversation between Ralph Vaccaro and Anthony DeVingo. Anthony was wearing a black one. We knew he was in possession of the gambling records.
Okay, we'll start over here. The these phone lines go right around the baseboard, all the way to the back here. See all the connectors? It's all jumped up for the bugs. That covers that. It's hard to disguise for that. Now, let me show you where the camera was and a bug in the wall. Okay. This was the bracket to hold the camera in place. There's the hole right there. Here's where we used to look through and see them to identify the voices when we were on the wire, on that little saw slit that I put there. Okay. Now, see this here? There's your bug in the wall. Here you got the phone lines going to it. And the Genovese headquarters is right on the other side of this tiny wall. Right here. Right in here. Through the wall. Is that that's the club. Right there. What we did was disguise BX cable. We took the metal BX cable and gutted it, and then put the phone lines in the bugs, in the BX cable, and so that even if the electrician went in the ceiling, they couldn't notice the bugs. The rest of the office is just a fraudulent oil company. The posters I got from the supply place. We have a minimum amount of tools here. Got a dead phone over there that goes nowhere. The chairs and the desks came from the state police. De-advertising means nothing. It's all a fraud. And we've been here a year. It's my suntan oil for when I sit on a sidewalk with the bad guys, so I don't get too badly burned. Okay, I'm gonna get out of here.
wiretaps paid off in a lot of ways. They revealed to the state police that there were a lot of gambling records stored at the Finish Line Pizzeria, run by Pee-wee. He made the statement into the bug that he has 100 workers in this gambling operation. Now the state police are going to try and take down the Finish Line Pizzeria in a preliminary raid to get these gambling records. All right, right there is Michael Del Gercio with the gray collared shirt on. Now, Michael Del Gercio is a made guy in a Genovese family, very clever individual. His last arrest was in 1967, has managed to evade the police since those years. All right, now that Oldsmobile right there, straight ahead, facing us, is Howie Butts. He's a state police officer. He is the guy that's going to call the shots when they go in, when he sees all 4 people with arrest warrants. Big John, Michael Del Gercio, Tommy D. Phillips, and Phil Denoya. There comes Phil Denoya right there in that Tornado. That's his mother's car. He is also one of the people we have an arrest warrant for. And he's the guy with the gambling records for this whole operation. Now there's his Continental that he's walking up to too, right there. He's the #1 guy right under Tommy D. Phillips, Pee-wee. Here comes Big John. He's the enforcer for the group. That's about the equivalent of his day's work besides roughing up people is a gopher. That's his IQ. Big John also serves as a part-time short order cook besides being a leg breaker. Here he comes back again with the papers for Pee-wee and probably a loaf of bread. And then this guy will go around and make their rounds later on, pick up all the gambling slips and pick up the loan shark money for Pee-wee. Here comes Howie Butts again. There he is. That's Michael Del Gercio's Cadillac. And here's a Newark marked radio car. I'm going to issue Michael Del Gercio's car a summons. That uniformed police officer has no idea that there's going to be a raid taking place. He's just there to enforce the parking regulations for the street sweeper. Phil Denoya has just left the scene now in his mother's car, and the detectives on the scene are probably looking for his Lincoln. There's Michael Del Gercio receiving the summons and going to complain now he's a big-time mob guy, and who am I to get a parking ticket? Then now he owns that space for the day. There's Howie Butts again, right there. Howie Butts is a state police officer. And you get a good shot of his car. There's Tommy D. Phillips with the sunglasses on. He's the big boss of this group. Okay, Howie Butts has proceeded in the door, which means the raid is on.